More than 250 experts in the traffic signals industry joined together in person to hear a range of papers here in Nottingham. These recordings are brought to you by AGD Systems, Colas, SRL Traffic Systems, Smart Video and Sensing, Vivacity and Untitled Traffic.
Thank you. UTMC is dead. Long live UTMC. Right, this morning I am going to change your opinion of UTMC, or if you don't have an opinion of UTMC, I'm going to give you an opinion to take home. I should say before I start, by UTMC I'm talking about systems which implement the bulk of the UTMC frameworks. That's the common database, essentially. We tend to recall these systems, common databases, as a shorthand. So this is things like Dynniq's ImCity, for example. As the title implies, my talk this morning is motivated by two opposing points of view. And I've actually got two quotations from previous speakers here at JCT, which are going to motivate this talk. I shall read them for you now. Number one, the UTMC framework is an anachronistic relic based on technologies that are insecure, outdated, and largely unknown to anyone graduating as a software engineer in the last decade. By lazily specifying UTMC compliant rather than providing proper functional specifications, buyers are shutting out modern, innovative products that would deliver better value. Number two, the UTMC framework is a triumph of collaboration. It is a textbook example of how the government-led development of standards can lead to the creation of valuable products that would not have emerged otherwise. Technically, it is without competition. By specifying the transport layer, data model, and architecture, it guarantees plug-and-play interoperability in a way that no modern alternative can. Okay, so two fairly opposing points of view there. There are the quotations on the screen, and for those of you for whom that's around 120 words too many at this time on day 2 of JCT, I prepared a pictorial representation of the case. There we go. Okay, so, sorry, shuffle my notes around. Probably the best place to start to try and figure out which of these two people was right. And by the way, I will tell you who the two people were. I've kept the names off to avoid biasing you at this point. I will tell you who they were, and I will tell you who was right as well at the end of this talk. The proof of the pudding generally is in the eating, and in the case of UTMC, it's in what transport authorities are actually buying. So, well, let me give you a rundown of what transport authorities are buying. At Dynniq, certainly, authorities are buying UTMC. We've had Derbyshire, Derby City, Transport Scotland, and West Yorkshire Combined Authority come on board as UTMC customers in the last year, so the market is booming, and all of them specifically requested UTMC. Highways England have bought a UTMC system. They've also bought a UTC system, neither from Dynniq, I should add, but within the last couple of years they've bought both, after never embracing either of those technologies for the entirety of their existence until now. TfL have released a pre-tender notice, which I think they may have backtracked on now, but it did come out, for a UTMC system to run their variable message signs because they don't want their current proprietary system anymore. So the theme that we saw across all of those is interoperability. The proof of the pudding is in the interoperability, maybe. All of them cited interoperability as being the key reason why they were choosing and specifying UTMC. But what do we mean when we talk about interoperability? Well, our second quotation, the positive one, used the term plug and play. So let's examine what we mean by plug and play. Well, a great example of plug and play is the plug itself, as the name suggests, the humble 13-amp plug. Now, the clue is in the name there to some extent. I know for a start I can get up to 13 amps out of this plug. I know I can get 230 volts out of this plug. I know which pins are which, and I know exactly what distances there are between all the pins. Why is this important? Well, it's important because if I'm writing my notes for today's talk, and it's a little bit dark on my desk, I need some more light. I can go out to IKEA, I can buy a desk lamp, I can come home and I can plug it in and I will have light. I don't need to employ an electrician to wire my desk lamp into my house. I don't need to employ a firm of consultants to explore options for the illumination of my workspace. It just works. So what does UTMC offer us in this respect? What plugs does UTMC give us? Well, UTMC gives quite a lot. It is a big standard, as the second quotation suggested. And I won't go through all of it, but in terms of plugs, there are two particularly important ones. It actually specifies everything that's on this diagram is actually specified by UTMC, not just the plugs. But there are two particularly important interfaces, plugs offered by UTMC. There's this one over here, Snmp. So this is UTMC specifies an Snmp, some simple network messaging protocol interface by which roadside devices can talk to adapters or applications. We call them adapters, the standard calls them applications, but essentially in-station software. It also specifies this over here, CORBA, Common Object Request Broker Architecture. Doesn't really matter what it stands for. But it specifies the interface between the application and the common database. So you've got a set of standard interfaces the whole way from the roadside to the common database. The CORBA interface is what means you can buy a Siemens UTC and a Dynniq UTMC, and with a fairly minimal amount of swearing, have them working together straight away, with no software development required. You could do it the opposite way around as well, if you like. You could buy a Dynniq UTC and a Siemens UTMC, or any of the other UTMCs that are available on the market, and again, they would plug and play, because they both offer a CORBA interface. The Snmp interface is the reason that you can buy variable message signs from pretty much any manufacturer and have them work with your UTMC system. The Snmp UTMC interface is pretty much ubiquitous in VMS in the UK, at least in the urban space. So, given that that sounds really quite useful, why was our first speaker, our first quotation, so pessimistic about these plugs? Well, let's dig a bit deeper into some of the cases I've already mentioned. I'm just going to click through these because they're not in quite the right order. So there you go. You can have some animation from the 90s. Let's do VMS first. Okay, so the UTMC protocol is pretty much ubiquitous in VMS. That is true. It's ubiquitous, but it is not sufficient. If you go and talk to Swarco, they'll be able to tell you about the amazing VMS they can supply now in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, with colors, graphics, backgrounds, paging, different layouts, text boxes. None of that is supported by the UTMC Snmp protocol. It only understands fixed-size text-only signs. So Swarco's solution to this is they've embedded what I call Swarco code inside the UTMC protocols. It's no longer quite standard, but it does a whole lot more stuff, which obviously is the bit you care about as the end user. But the standard's kind of gone walkabout a bit. Highways England, yeah, they bought UTMC specifically to be able to interoperate, to integrate with the UTMC systems in local authorities as part of their collaborative traffic management program. That was the primary reason for buying UTMC. However, and the amazing thing, actually, I should say, is that they then went out engaged with not only their suppliers and consultants, but the whole UTMC industry, and actually helped specify and fund an extension to the UTMC standard, which is something that hasn't happened other than that in the last decade, I don't think. However, that extension to the UTMC standard didn't use CORBA or Snmp. It could have used CORBA, but they were advised that CORBA is an outdated and insecure protocol, and instead we have collaborative traffic management interfaces, which are implementations of DATEX 2. So they bought it for the interoperability, but they didn't use the plugs. So something seems a bit amiss here. There's these guys as well at the top, so hackers stroke software developers. Essentially all I need to say about this is that the person in the first quotation was right on that point. People leaving university today will not know CORBA or know what CORBA is, and neither CORBA nor Snmp version 1, which is what UTMC is, are secure. There's just simply no mechanism of encryption or security in those protocols at all. The way we make them secure is by wrapping them up inside VPN tunnels. So they were completely right. They are old and insecure protocols. So if this plug-and-play interoperability isn't about the plugs, I've told you it's plug-and-play, but now I've told you that people aren't really using the plugs. So why are people buying it for interoperability and they're not using the plugs? Well, I've got this far into my talk, and I have talked completely about abstract concepts, about technology, about wires, about plugs. Other than my trip to IKEA, I haven't mentioned humans once. Oops. So perhaps actually it's not about plugging and playing on a technical level, it's about plugging and playing for humans. We're a small industry. I'd imagine probably the majority of the office-based staff in this industry are sat in this room right now. So let's hope there's not a disaster. We're also a fragmented industry. I would imagine there's probably not more than 2 or 3 of you from the same transport authority sat in this room. And I'd imagine quite a few of you have moved between transport authorities at some point in your career. The benefit of having transferable skills, transferable tooling, moving between different places can't be underestimated. If every local authority had a completely unique traffic signal controller, a completely unique UTC-like system, a completely unique UTMC system, the training burden, which we've already established, it was asked during Darren Capes' talk at the beginning of yesterday, training is already a challenge in our industry. The training burden would be intolerable if everyone had completely unique systems. But it's not just about the technical humans, it's also about the finance and procurement humans, or what passes for humans, at least in those parts. Finance teams love a plug-and-play business case. If you can say, here is a product that has a proven benefit. So we've seen earlier talking about 25% savings with the Fusion algorithm, for example. If there's a plug-and-play business case, you can pick it up, say, this product delivers these benefits. There you go, give me money. That makes life a lot easier for finance teams. They don't have to go out and actually try and audit and understand what it is you're buying. Procurement teams can pretty much right now just write, I would like a UTMC, please, and reference the UTMC technical specification at utmc.uk. If they didn't have that to fall back on, they would have to write a complete functional specification, as the first person suggested, when they wanted to buy something. Now, those of you that have recently procured a UTMC system, or indeed anything through your procurement departments, will tell me that it's probably 100 times harder than writing, can I have a UTMC, please? Imagine if you hadn't had that common technical specification to fall back on, and you'd had to get your procurement department to write an entire technical specification from the ground up. It would have been intolerable, like as with the training burden. It would have been impossible. Okay, so I've told you earlier on that the technology is out of date, but I've told you that there seems to be some redeeming qualities here as well. So let me finish my presentation by posing a question and attempting to answer it. Do we need a replacement for UTMC? Is it still fit for purpose? Well, from a technical point of view, purely looking at those technologies, we will eventually need a replacement, because the burden of keeping old technologies going gets more and more and more over time. We call it technical debt in the jargon. For example, there will come a point when Snmp and Corba may not be permitted by, let's say, the Windows operating system. It may actually say these protocols are insecure and will be blocked by some kind of fancy Windows paperclip that blocks insecure protocols. So then you won't be able to have the latest version of Windows anymore if you want this. You'll have to go out and try and buy old versions of Windows. And then your IT department comes into the question, can I buy an old version of Windows for my laptop, please? No, you can't. So there is a case. But the more important question is, do we need a thing that does the things that UTMC does now? Well, I think I made the case that we do need that plug-and-play for humans element. We need the plug-and-play technical operation. We need the familiarity, something you can move between authorities and have it be recognizable. We need the plug-and-play business case where, at least to some extent, it can be off the shelf. But I think it would be a mistake simply to say, okay, well, the obvious conclusion here then is we need exactly what UTMC is now, but we just need to find some better technologies for these plugs, some newer technologies. I'll tell you why that would be a mistake. That would be a mistake because we've talked over the last day and a bit about things like connected vehicles, in-vehicle signage. UTMC, as a vanilla standard, doesn't have any concept of a vehicle. It doesn't have any concept of in-vehicle signage. It doesn't have any concept of electric vehicle charging points. It doesn't have any concept of buses and public transport. That's actually something we've got as a private extension to the standard in IMCity, but it'd be better if it was part of an actual standard. Similarly, it doesn't understand individual parking bays. It understands car parks, but if you're dealing with on-street parking, EV charging bays, single car parking bays, again, is something we had to add to IMCity because it's not in the standard. So I think we need a full and frank discussion about what it is we actually want. And of course, those are all just things I've just listed: parking bays, EV charging, in-vehicle signage. What do you actually want to do with them? What do you want to achieve with them? The existing standard doesn't tell you much about that. It just makes the assumption you have stuff and you want to get data from it and send instructions to it. That's kind of it. But there must be some commonality amongst what you actually want to do, what you want to achieve. What are your use cases? How do we justify our wages as people running transport networks? So, in summary, is UTMC alive or dead? That's where I started this talk. Well, right now, UTMC is a kind of Schrodinger's cat of technologies. It is both alive and dead. It's only by collaboration, getting together and doing something akin to what was done when UTMC was formed originally, by pooling our resources, understanding what our collective needs are, and that will make it possible to come up with something that could replace or evolve UTMC. So right now it is a Schrodinger's cat. It is both alive and dead inside a sealed box, and it's down to us what we find when we open that box. And yeah, I haven't forgotten. I will tell you who said the things, and I will tell you who was right, despite my rather equivocal ending. I said both of them. I said them about 15 minutes ago. I don't know why your memory is so bad. And I was right. There you go, that's the cop-out answer. Sorry, that seems rather self-indulgent, but I've spent pretty much every minute of the last 2 years at home with my wife and 2 daughters, and this is the first time I've been right in that time. So,
I'm acutely aware that the morning after the gala dinner, you are not popular if you stand between a person and the coffee break. So we'll keep this really quickly. Any questions for Simon? That was fantastic and very entertaining. Any questions for Simon, or is the lure of coffee greater than further discussion on UTMC?
I appreciate coffee, so I don't mind.
Catch him on the Dynniq stand. That was fantastic. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you.